Hello, this is Tijen Genco, Master Certified Coach and Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. This is an episode of Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. I have such a pleasure to having Nanor Ohanesian with me as my companion today. Welcome, Nanor. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Tijen. I'm excited to be here today.
Absolutely. I'm delighted for our partnership. And Nanor and I are going to talk about importance and specific things to look for when one needs a coach and what are the distinctions and qualifications and all that. But before we get into that, what would you like our audience to know about you, Nanor?
Well, I've entered the coaching world back in 2014 when I took a coach training program. It was a 1-year in-person intensive program, and then I did a 1-year mentor coaching for that organization as well. And at that same time, I joined the International Coaching Federation, which is a global organization and has its specific chapters. And I joined the chapter that was closest to ours. And a few years after that, back in 2017, I joined the board, and I've been serving there, volunteering for ever since, basically. And I've done many, many positions there, including the president. And this year, I'm the director of credentials. So I think I've earned my way up the ladder there. And then last year, I joined a very small team, and we did we created and designed a program that is a coach training program, level 1 through International Coaching Federation, again, to be accredited and certified. And so we were able to get that accredited. And now I do coaching, mentoring, and training other coaches to go through the program and become ACC certified.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Thank you for all your efforts, Nanor. Lovely to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So how would you like us to get started?
Yeah, so I think I would first love, I think a lot of people know about coaching nowadays, but some people still ask, like, are you a sports coach? Like, what kind of coaching do you do? And I mean, we recently had that asked to us just this weekend. The board met somewhere and somebody asked, so what kind of, like, are you a soccer coach? Or
Yeah.
So yeah, so I would love for you to first just tell us, with your experience as a master certified coach and also as a coach educator, like in your view, what is the definition of coaching?
My definition is quite similar to ICF, International Coach Federation's definition. The coach is a partner to support the individuals for their desired change initiatives and in the way they wish to be executing. So a couple things are then important, the way we define the coach. It's a behavioral and cognitive partnership to support someone to become more aware about what they might be presenting themselves as a challenge as they wish to change something in their lives. And then deciding what they're going to do about that challenge. So the way I teach this, as you know, that coach isn't an accountability partner. Coach isn't somebody pushing the client to do something. Coach is there to support them to understand what it is that they want to make clarify that as a change in their life, what, in their view, what may be blocking them from getting what they want. And once they understand that, then they have an option whether to dissolve that or not.
Mhm.
So coach is an indifferent partner about what the client is going to do or not do. And as humanly possible, objective observer to present what they are seeing and recognizing so that the client becomes more aware of their tendencies, behaviors, ambitions, and desires and lack thereof, and then decide what they wish to do about that. How does that definition resonate with you?
Certainly has nothing to do with the sports coach. It sounds, Tijen, the way your definition is quite deep. It's, especially when you said it's not an accountability partner, because oftentimes you hear that a lot from coaches where, they're going to make you achieve that goal, right? And I'm going to make sure that you do this, and I'm going to be there with you 100%. But that's not objective, like in the sense that like you were describing it, where you just kind of looks like you lay out all the options and help them see things that they otherwise would not have been able to see. And then they get to choose versus, us as coaches pushing them. And, I know you've talked in the past a lot about transactional, transformative and transcendental, and I'm hearing a lot of your transcendental and transformative ways of coaching, the way you define it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. I mean, if the partnership arrives at a point that it makes sense for coach to be an accountability partner, that can be discussed. But coach is not by default fits into that role. And in fact, as you know, I inform and tell my students to, when possible, not to assume that role, because our partnership is a temporary one. We're not by default a support structure of another human being. In fact, we don't need to get into that space. So that when we finish our engagement, there is no gap left in their support structure.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. So what are the submodalities of coaching or under coaching?
Yeah, I think that if somebody goes to the ICF website and try to look at the directory to select, they're going to find a lot of different specialties. What are some of the most known are the professional or executive coaching, life coaching, wellness or well-being coaching, as I say it. But there are additional ones that the people can be a career coach, and that can mean very different things. There are actually transition coaches. There are coaches that emotional support coaches, and all bunch of things that people can find. So I think for our audience to understand what is the specific partnership that they're looking for, then they can look into particular submodalities to find someone who has spent significant amount of years in that space.
Got it. Okay. Okay. I think like like this actually tomorrow at our chapter, we're doing a session on grief coaching. Very, very specific, right? But I think some of the more broader ones are life coaching, executive coaching, you hear that a lot, leadership coaching, you kind of hear that a lot, and then the well-being coaching. What are, like, if you could describe to us, what are the differences of these types of coaching?
I think that if you if we were to think about coach education, within the core competencies of coach training, what coaches learn to how to relate to the client, how to structure the session, how to listen to the client, there is no difference.
Mhm.
What makes the difference then? The application of those things in a particular life scenario. That life scenario could be somebody having an executive leadership role, and the life scenarios are then going to be relevant to that role. Or somebody can be having a leadership role as a mother, then the life scenarios are going to be their leadership as a mother. They're trying to manage their teenager situations or whatever they may be. Or somebody may be wanting to achieve a particular wellness goal, which we often think about, oh, how much muscle do I have, how much BMI, my BMI needs to be, and so on. But the wellness can be very different things for very different people. There are very complex illnesses such as heart disease, cancer, HIV, and they would require behavioral changes in somebody's life to respond to what illness needs for them to be doing, or their healthcare team is asking. So it could be more about those particular contexts. How is that?
Okay, yeah, that's so I can see, so a lot, I think what I heard is, even though as coaches, the base of what we do is pretty much the same, the training wise, what we're listening for and things like that, the observations we make. However, the content is what's going to be quite different based on, whether we're doing life coaching, executive, and so forth. That comes, I'm thinking about two different questions. So I'll ask one first is, in the coach training program that I was a part of, we were taught that because, as you said, the base is kind of the same, we can coach anyone on anything, was the mindset that they kind of left us with. So don't give yourself a niche, don't put yourself into a little, pigeonhole. But at the same time, a lot of my colleagues were like, well, I don't know anything about, business, or I've never been an executive, or I don't know people who are executives. So they get challenged to actually coach maybe an executive or even somebody who's having health issues. What are your thoughts about these more specialized, let's say, coaching roles versus I'm a coach for anyone and anything?
Thank you for that question. I'm also on the belief that once one is well educated and learned how to listen and respond, they can coach for any situation. What matters, though, and I know that a lot of the organizations look for coaches for their executive bench, for example. They look for people that have been in the position and all that. I think what it is that think about you coaching somebody that is in charge of a large hospital. All of a sudden, their labor partners are demonstrating outside, asking him to resign, and you're their coach, right? So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So that sort of situation may require some level of oomph and some level of knowing and stabilization. Not necessarily, we're not the experts to tell them, oh, go do this with your labor partner. Or somebody shows up to your session, all of a sudden to tell you, well, I'm just coming from a doctor and they told me I have a terminal cancer and I have 3 months left, then are you going to be able to stay stable
Yeah.
and coach the person? So I think that the subject matter expertise is helpful in some ways. I'm saying in some ways, because when we have them, it's helpful, and it also keeps us conditioned to our responses as a coach. So in some ways, it's helpful to ask relevant questions to devise the strategy from the client, because then we have the language, subject matter expertise language to relate and response. But it can also be a downfall when we feel like, oh, we know how it is, we know what to do, and so on. So it is yes, and with some caution.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. So there's definitely, so it's doable, right? To not be an expert in a field and still coach. And then there's pros and sometimes cons to being a little bit more versed or very versed even, because then you have your programming around what that looks like, and it could potentially maybe narrow the coaching to what you believe already. So there's some pros and cons.
Absolutely. And there is also, as you know me say this, Nanor, that we have the potential to become a better coach once we master the traumas we've been through. So in that sense, if I've been through an executive role where I've been challenged enough, if I've been to a leadership role where I took my small company through becoming a public company, I may have been through certain challenges. So then that also gives me a further abilities, if I master them as a human being, to take another person in a deeper level in their self-expression. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So then in those situations, what I love about what you're sharing is then we're not limited by our programming, because we've actually purified them in a way, and we just have the experience of it, but not the holding back of it almost.
Correct.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Tijen. That's a huge asset for sure for a coach to have.
Yeah.
You know, earlier when you were talking about the well-being part and all of these difficult and traumatic situations that people experience with some of their diagnoses, and they could be coming to the coaching session in searching for more of a therapeutic conversation, maybe. Can you share a little bit more around between, you know, the role of a coach versus a therapist, and whatever you think is important for, you know, our audience to know about that when they're choosing their coach?
Yeah, so the main distinction that separate, I mean, there are two main distinctions, I would say, that separates coaches from the therapists. One is in therapy setting, the therapist is in charge. They decide the treatment plans. They decide what they often, I would say, right? They decide what they direct the conversations and so on. The other distinction is that in coaching, we can get in a partnership when the client can conduct their life and they have capacity to make a decision for themselves.
Mm.
When that isn't present, then coaching won't work. So if somebody has been so severely impacted by a particular thing in their life, and they cannot see themselves outside of that relationship to that particular event or a trauma, that will severely impact their capacity in decision making and the way they can produce changes for themselves. And therefore, they may need additional support and maybe psychiatric medicines and other things, that other interventions. So that's the main distinction. And in some cases, people want to be heard and given advice, then maybe then they are more suited in the partnership with a counselor. So understanding these distinctions are helpful when one is looking for a support structure and a partnership for their change initiatives. Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of actually a question that I had that I'm going to move into next, but which is the credentialing of coaching, right? Because, you gave a few different scenarios right there. And how would a coach that's not really trained be able to even notice and catch those distinctions and be able to, refer the client to whether it's a counselor, a therapist, so that to recognize that, oh, this person is not capable, as you said, to conduct their life, right? Which is, for me, is unable to function, essentially. So, and then, the talk therapy part to really go to a counselor. So, we know, I know, I know that the coaching industry is not regulated in any way, in the sense that and like coaches don't need to have a license to call themselves a coach. So it's unregulated. So at least in the United States and a lot of the countries worldwide. So with that, I know you just gave one example of therapy now, but what else is important for somebody to be credentialed as a coach when you're choosing your coach?
Yeah, so maybe we talk a little bit about credentialing and coach education, and then I'll answer that. So people can go through coach training, but they may choose not to get to their credentials. I have some of my students, and you know how I sometimes say to them, it's time, come on, let's go through the process as a mentor. So credentialing in a way that assesses how the coach training landed on the individuals and how are they demonstrating that through the certain exams, whether it's an oral exam or a written exam, and they're given some life scenarios and asked to respond to them, so that the credentialing organization doing their efforts to assess the coach's readiness and understanding these ethics, as well as the professional conduct and all that, right? So that's the credentialing. There is the coach training, and then there is the credentialing part. Obviously, a lot of the coach training already presents exams and assessments as the people going through the training. But I know that a few years ago, International Coach Federation actually did a lot of effort to regulate the coach training organizations to make sure, because they were popping out online and not necessarily having a lot of, I'm not saying online trainings are not, doesn't have a merit. We do, I also offer online trainings, but is it like 1 weekend, 2-hour training is enough? And we do know that the people have some life experience, like our grandmothers from our cultures, our first coaches, right? They were great coaches, but not in the way we think how coaching works. And so people are calling themselves coaches. And in fact, I see them in action sometimes, and it can be quite harmful, what they're doing and what they're saying, and how they unintentionally maybe disempowering somebody and asking them to be dependent on them and so on. So there are that, right? There are people that they may not have any education at all, calling themselves coaches or credentialing. There may be some coaches, they are trained, but not credentialed. And then there is the credentialing. And there are major credentialing organizations around the world that they are doing this sort of a regulatory aspect, some level of regulatory aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went back to like the beginning, right? Which is the coach training part, because I have a lot of colleagues who have been coaching for like 20 years, who have chosen to not get credentialed, but boy, do they have a ton of training and are really, really good coaches that probably follow a lot of the ethics, the conducts and the behaviors, but for whatever reason haven't chosen to get credentialed. But then, like you said, there are those weekend courses that you just take and you're like, okay, well, now I'm a coach. Yeah. And you said they can call some of that type of coaching, because I know you do a lot of mentor coaching, so you hear and you assess
Yes.
a lot of calls. So you hear a lot of what the trainings people are getting and what that looks like.
What they're not getting.
Or what they're not getting and what that looks like. But I'm curious a little bit about this harmful part that you mentioned. You said it can be a little bit harmful. Can you share just a little bit about that and what that might look like?
Absolutely. I just want to add what you just say so the audience can understand. I do assessments, portfolio assessments for International Coach Federation, and they come globally. So I am exposed to a lot of coach trainings. What I'm saying is that people who haven't been through training, and training is not always the be all in everything. And it also depends, as we know, that trainers could do their best to relay the information. But training is like coaching, that the person needs to observe and take it in, right? So there is that as well. But what I see often that people want to coach or change others, they have ideas how people need to be. So they can give them advice, do this, do the other thing, and make this choice and so on. And they can easily get into a codependent relationship to self-validate the coach's needs, which I often warn about my students to get their needs met elsewhere so that they're not accompanying them in a coaching conversation or without knowing that could be harmful. They could say certain things that could impact the person's self-confidence in another way. So that's what I meant harmful, giving advice, saying certain things that don't necessarily agree with the client. One of my executive clients actually mentioned something that their therapist said, and it actually impacted them quite a bit, their capability. So we're all human beings, obviously. Sometimes we end up saying not so good things.
Right.
But I think the likelihood of a coach and a therapist or a counselor saying something may bruise another human being,
Mhm.
likely less likely because of the training and all that they've been through versus somebody doesn't even know the concepts.
Right, right. Yeah, that awareness piece to even acknowledge that, you know, when we are giving advice or whatever it is, which we shouldn't be anyways, but what the consequences of that could be, but just having awareness around that, like even if a coach is listening to this right now, you know, they'll start becoming more aware that that could have a repercussion.
Yeah.
So that's now I understand what you mean about the harmful part. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. All right, well, why don't we move to something a little, I guess, like a practical in the sense of how does one when someone's looking for a coach around what they need, like how does one go about something like that?
I think it will be first helpful for them to really clarify what it is they need, what kind of support they need. And then once they figure that out, obviously, you will appreciate this, Nanor, that when I am delivering the beginning of the coach trainings, pretty much 99% of the students say, well, the clients don't know what they want to talk about. And I say, if they did, they wouldn't need you, right? You want a very crisp, clear everything. It is just the beginning. Even if they determine just one sentence, this is what I may need, start from there, but just do your work like any, whenever educated, it's not necessarily a shopping, but educated shopper, you gotta first understand, what do I need, right? Not necessarily going into retail therapy. You want to understand, what do I need? And then how am I going to go about figuring that out, where to get that?
Mhm.
So the grief coaching you talked about, grief coaching could be applied in anything. Am I feeling sad about a loss of somebody, a loss of a relationship, loss of myself, loss of my belonging? It's very different things, even within that,
Right.
right? Loss of my health. What am I looking for? Why am I sad about? And what kind of support do I need? If I am, for example, feeling sad about losing my health, am I going to look for a health and wellness coach? Or am I going to look for a life coach
Mhm.
that is going to help me adjust my behaviors with the new functionality? Or am I going to have a health and wellness coach help me recover me to get back into that, or both? Or am I an executive that is lost their health? Then, right?
Wow.
Right? How do I lead from a wounded place?
Wow. So true. So different.
Yeah.
Similar, you know, the root is your health is off, but what do you really need from it can lead you in so many different directions of who to choose at that
Yes.
point, or what kind
And
of coach.
absolutely. And which organization to even look go to and what to select as a niche.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Really great examples there. Thank you, Tijen. That was really good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So once we, let's say, have a pretty good idea of our need, at least
Beginning.
beginning part, surface wise, because we know how we can go down and get to what the true authentic core need is, which is
Yes.
where the coaching's magic really happens anyways. What are, like, again, practically, what do you think are some good questions for coaches to ask when they're looking for, not coaches, clients to ask when they're looking for a coach?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is quite important. This is what I say also to my students. Understand your values, and when you're having initial conversations with your client, make sure they are in alignment. So it's the same with the client, right? If there is a major value clash, that can't be in harmonic or trusted relationships. So what matters to you in life and a certain anchoring values, one needs to understand that and then understand the coach's response to those things. And the other thing is important. This is where clients needs to decide, right? I have, for example, some of Asian clients, Asian female clients, executives, when they're looking for a coach, I tell them that you want to have somebody who understand how culture shaped you, but you don't want to have somebody from that culture that hasn't mastered themselves out of that shaping.
Wow.
Right? Because then your blind spots are also going to be their blind spots. They can't get you out of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And if they don't understand you at all, how the culture shaped you, then they're also not going to be able to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I think if you think about our very first meeting, I talked about the Armenian dishes to you as a metaphor to get us to establish that relationship and a support. So that is important to understand, have the clients to interview the coach's understanding of their background.
Yeah.
And then they are distancing to that background. That will be another thing. And then the rest becomes the style, right? That some people like to be challenged a lot in a very harsh way, which is fine. And some people like to be cared and loved and nurtured. And some people like to have both. And so the rest would be that, as well as where are they in their consciousness? If they're looking for somebody to get them keep going versus to get in a deeper level of themselves, that's also is another key. What might you add to that?
You know, your response was not what I was expecting. Nothing new there. You're always full of your magic tricks. You're always full of that. And you know, I thought you would, you know, literally when you say, even if you Google what to ask for a coach when you're going to hire a coach, you get this, like, you know, this beautiful list of like 15 things you must ask. And so I was waiting for something like that. But the fact that you went straight to, you know, knowing your values and how that aligns with your coach's values and all of the nuances of your coach, their development, where they are in their life. Like, I think most people would not be thinking to ask these types of or looking for these types of things. And then, yeah, the style, maybe that's something they could look for initially, but I think this was extremely valuable, what you just shared. I don't know what I would add to that, but this was extremely valuable, I think. And I'm thinking back to my time of like when I first, was given a coach in my coach training program, and I'm curious, did they think about these things when they partnered me with someone? So even though it was a decent match, it was a good match, but I think what you just shared is so valuable, including, like you said, from the beginning, from the coach's perspective, when they are going to work with the client. And now hearing this, how much more of my responsibility as a coach it is to bring this to the attention of a new client when we are having our first chemistry session.
Yeah.
Like for me to be able to do this with them. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
That's the distinction of human beings and an AI, right? The AIs can give you the list now, and that's a great list. That's a different partnership.
Yeah. Okay, and then so let me ask you this. So we know about the coach's role to get trained themselves and be the best version of themselves to come to the conversation. Now the client has found a coach that is aligned with their values and, it's the style that they want and all of that. They've hired one. What can one expect as results from coaching conversation? What are they going to get when they're in this relationship now, you think?
Well, hopefully, if that is a working partnership, they're gonna get what they were not getting out of self-expression in their life. And in the way they actually, as you know, Nanor, in our coaching style, we say that the client is empowered. So they need to come to each session owning their agenda and what they want to experience in their life. So then the coach will partner with them in removing whatever that is blocking their self-expression. So really the main value becomes a richer and more exciting life experience.
Wow, beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, a lot of, one of the things that I love about the coaching is people becoming more unstoppable. And that's what I'm hearing in this as well, and self-expression it's so important. And we don't often think about it in our daily lives. We just think about the doing. And the self-expression kind of gets brushed under the rug. And so, yeah, imagine a world where people are empowered enough, confident enough, and healed enough to be able to express themselves in a natural and authentic way is pretty amazing. There'd be a lot of joy in this world, I think.
Absolutely. And the doing is still part of the self-expression, but it's often unconscious and reactive self-expression. What hopefully we'll do in a transformative coaching partnership, that the people become much more owning their choices and self-aware and then choosing a desired self-expression.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so yeah, I can't think of, I think, so when you hire a coach, knowing that this might be the result, and how long do you think most coaching engagements are, more or less? Is there an average or?
Yeah, it depends on what the unlearning is and what the learning is. As
See,
we know,
another unexpected answer.
unlearning can take anywhere from a minute to 50 years, right? And so unlearning a behavior, I often say, requires much frequent sessions, and anywhere between 1 month to hopefully up to 6 months to unlearn an experience. And then it depends on the partnership. This is where I give full freedom to my clients. I don't lock them in a particular number of sessions, I explain the consequences and then they can decide. But there are some coaching clients that can see me every quarter or twice a year because they're just coming for a tune-up. But some
Right.
people would be there. But I mean, in the beginning, I would recommend at least 3 to 6 months, depending on what the desired outcome is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love it. Depends on the unlearning and the learning. Wonderful. Okay, well, is there what else is there, like what do you need to say to, to our group to kind of complete our call today? What's the value that you want to share at the end?
Absolutely. I think that we discussed and we touched upon a lot of different things. One thing we haven't talked about is the different levels in the credentialing, at least in the International Coach Federation or otherwise. National Board Certification offers one level. International Coach Federations offer 3 levels. There are different levels in Europe. So I think then often, not always, but the credentialing levels also relates to the price that the clients end up paying, because to progress through the levels takes a lot of efforts and training and experience. So that's what often then the person will end up paying. So look for what you need and complexities of the change journey you have, and then find a relevant experience and expertise in the way that you're looking for. So, and again, the credentialing organizations often have a directory for people that they can look for credentialed coaches. They can find their website and so on. And then I think look through the other things we highlighted in this discussion to choose the right partnership. Anything else you wish to add to that, Nano?
Well, I was thinking, what was I thinking? I was thinking if, I asked my husband earlier, I said, what do you wish when you're looking for a coach, what do you wish you had? And he said, I wish I had a list of like what I could check off and so forth. And I personally, from our conversation today, can see the value of what you shared versus, a generic, a list would not provide, versus what we just talked about today. So I think one of the biggest things I think for me was to get clear that the values are aligned. I think that was huge. And then this last part where you just shared the unlearning and the learning, it is about that. And I never thought of it that way, but at the end of the day, that's what they're coming to do, right? And I think a lot of places call it, changing your habits or whatever, but it's an unlearning of a lot of cultural, experiential, things that we've all been through, and seeing that it's not serving us, and what are we going to do about it then?
Beautifully said. Thank you for that, Nanor. And recognizing the magnitude of that unlearning will help then the client, whether they're going to go to a beginner
Yeah.
level credential coach or a mastery level credential coach, has
Yeah.
that sort of a journey experience to support. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Amazing. Good.
Yeah.
So hopefully, you know, this will help some people in choosing a coach that will be a perfect, and not a perfect, but a really good fit for them to partner with and achieve whatever needs to be expressed for them, right?
Absolutely, and beautiful. Thank you for your partnership today. And for our audience, thank you for being with us. What you've been listening into and watching is called Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco, an original podcast from Genco Coaching. And if you like what you heard, check our website out and look into the upcoming events. And if also you would like to leave us a feedback and subscribe to us, we would love that. Thank you for being with us.